And welcome, everyone, to the Eat, Drink, Explore Radio Network's Market Fresh Hour. I am your host, Randall White. It is now 33 minutes past the hour. And as always, we like to thank you for joining us, tuning in each and every week right here on this very station. This portion of Eat, Drink, Explore's Market Fresh is brought to you by Sidecar Restaurant in downtown San Luis Obispo. That's on Broad between Higuera and Marsh Streets. Hey, stop in and see their friendly staff there at Sidecar as they work to grow out their mustaches and mohawks during the month of Movember. It's their attempt to raise awareness for men's health issues, especially prostate and testicular cancers. The manager there, Josh, isn't very good at growing facial hair. He'll be the first to tell you that his mustache looks terrible, but he's doing it for a fantastic cause. Go, pester him about it a little bit about it. The food at Sidecar is always fresh, local, seasonal, and sustainable. Often grown at small family farms right here on the Central Coast. Find Sidecar Restaurant online at sidecarslo.com and let them know you heard about their great restaurant right here on the radio. Now, speaking of small, local family farms, have you heard rumblings about how the Food Safety Modernization Act, signed back in January of 2011 by President Obama, could threaten some of these small operations and even make it a lot more difficult for growers to sell their goods at farmers markets? It really has caught my attention in recent days, so I thought maybe we should invite someone onto the program here who can illuminate the subject for us. Sarah Hackney is with the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, or NSAC for short. You can find them online at sustainableagriculture.net. Sarah joins us on the Market Fresh Live line right now. Welcome to the program, Sarah.
Thanks so much, Randall. Happy to be here.
So I started seeing Twitter posts on this, and then just based on my Google News feed, I started to see some articles as well. And it really threw me back a bit. I thought, wait a minute, I thought we were moving toward more small local farms and sustainability. How did this get thrown into the mix? Give us, in a nutshell, what or which provisions of this act are set to go into place and cause these problems?
Sure, absolutely. So as folks may know, this law was signed by President Obama in early 2011, and it got punted over to the Food and Drug Administration to implement what really is the first overhaul of our nation's food safety laws since the 1930s. And so what that really means is FDA has taken a hard look at how our nation grows and processes its fresh produce for people to eat, and setting in place a really brand new set of regulations to govern that. And the intent here is to reduce the risk of foodborne illness and pathogen contamination. Things like Salmonella or E. coli. Which we've had a
lot of, so you can see why there was an impetus for this.
Absolutely. The concern here is that in the rush to sort of roll out these new rules, FDA runs the risk of making sustainable agriculture collateral damage in that push. And there's a number of ways, and there's a couple of problems. I'll just highlight an example or two to help folks get a sense of it. So, for example, FDA puts in place, through these rules, a bunch of new guidelines about how growers can and can't use soil amendments like manure and compost. Now, if you're an organic farmer, those are two of the most important things you may use on your farm to help improve your soil and thus have great harvests.
Right.
The National Organic Program has had some really great science-based guidelines in place for years and years. So if you're certified organic, you're following some great guidelines that are already in place from the federal government about how to use those products safely. The new food safety rules directly conflict with those organic standards. And so what that does is that puts organic farmers in a real tight place where there are two conflicting federal rules on a practice that they need to use on their farm every day.
Right. And the organic industry is just growing and growing, so people don't want to lose their organic certification. They want to continue doing things that way.
Exactly. And we also don't want to see folks pushed away from using those natural amendments like compost and towards more chemical inputs.
Right.
And so, and now when Congress passed this law, they told FDA, now you can't conflict with existing rules. And unfortunately, FDA neglected to follow that mandate from Congress. And so it's really important that before these rules are finalized, issues like that get fixed so organic farmers aren't put at a disadvantage.
Wow. I was reading an article just the other day that if a farmer comes to the farmer's market with produce that still has dirt on it from the farm, that would be breaking the rule.
Oh man, I'm not sure that I've heard that one.
And I thought, well, that's ridiculous. Then we're just talking about completely processed produce that's been, triple washed and all those sorts of things, which you find at the supermarket. And there's nothing wrong with the triple washed lettuce and all that sort of thing. But I think when you go to the farmer's market, you have half a brain, and you know that the produce needs to be brought home and washed, and even if it's organic, it needs to be cleaned. Some people think that if it's organic, it doesn't have to be cleaned. I don't know. We got to clear that up.
It's always a good idea to wash your produce wherever it comes from. Absolutely.
Right. And so then where do we stand? How do we make sure that these conflicting rules don't get put into place?
Well, the good news is, Randall, that these rules are not yet final law. Just like with any new rules that the federal government seeks to implement, they do have to seek public comment first. Mm-hmm. And right now, the rules are really, you think of it as kind of like a first draft. FDA has opened them up for public comment. The comment period is open until Friday, November 15th for comments from anyone. That's farmers, consumers, business owners, anybody and everybody can and should weigh in with FDA.
So
and from there,
I just want to quickly say, so those listening right now to our Thursday night Market Fresh show, you have less than 24 hours to get your act together and send a note off to, if you're listening on Sunday, it's too late. But is it too late on Sunday? Is there still a way to get your voice out there?
That's a great question. By Sunday, it will be too late to formally register comments with FDA. That doesn't mean that you can't post about it. That doesn't mean you can't sort of share something on social media or speak your piece or write a letter. However, it does mean that will be past the close of the formal comment period.
I see.
From there, we don't yet know. FDA has not yet announced if they're going to go right into producing the final rule, aka the final laws, or if they're going to give us a second proposed rule, which is kind of like, if you submit your first draft to your teacher,
right?
You get a bunch of red ink all over it, you submit that second draft, and hopefully it's better.
You've seen my papers.
Yeah, exactly. We're hoping that with FDA, we get a chance to see a second draft before these rules have the full weight of law. But we don't yet know, and we hope that they will announce that not too soon after the close of this period.
Sarah,
so there may be a second chance, but we can't guarantee it.
This is not something that you contact your representative in Congress, because this didn't go through Congress. This is something directly through. You have to contact the FDA directly.
That's correct. Yep. Once that law was passed by Congress and signed by President Obama, it was turned over to FDA. Now, legislators, it's good for them to know what's going on, and certainly if you miss a deadline, it never hurts to it never hurts to contact your legislator. And if you submit comments to FDA, you can absolutely forward along a copy to your legislator. It's good for them to know that these issues are bubbling around. But you're right that it's not as directly in their purview as it is in the FDA's right now.
Sarah, some of the different provisions that I was looking at online give me the feeling, and this is just a gut feeling, that this legislation was written quickly and might have had some help from large producers to make the legislation favor them. Do we know that to be true or not?
There's definitely some concerns along those lines. Mm-hmm. Now, when this law was being debated in Congress, the sustainable agriculture community, with the help of some really great legislators, won a bunch of really important amendments through that process, including some that were designed, the key word here is scale appropriate, scale and risk appropriate. So the idea being that everyone has a role to make sure food is safe, but that regulations need to be right-sized for the right kinds of farms and the right amount of risk. And so your neighborhood farm who's selling product directly from their farm at the farmer's market or in a CSA to, 50 or 100 families is not the same risk to our food system as is a farm that's selling produce to 50 states across, millions of families.
Not at all.
So the rules need to reflect that. There are some pieces in place that we did win that reflect that, but you're right that there's a tendency, especially if someone's subject to the full weight of the rules, They're pretty expensive. They're pretty cumbersome. It'll be very, very hard for smaller, mid-sized growers to absorb the costs and all of the new red tape and paperwork.
Is there a dollar amount of goods grown or amount of acreage that a farm owns that is a breaking point for some of these rules?
There is. There's actually a couple of different tiers. I'd say for folks, for farmers out there who may be curious, definitely check out our website. We can give you the address on the show to get a little more detail.
Mm-hmm.
But the general gist of it is, on the produce side of things, you're selling less than $25,000 of produce, you're eligible to be fully exempt. So that's, again, intended for those very small folks.
That's a really small farm. Yeah.
Very small.
Mm-hmm.
If you're between $25,000 and $500,000 in sales, and the majority of what you sell is sold within 275 miles and sold directly to an end user, so like a customer or a restaurant, then you're eligible for modified rules, which are much less intensive and less expensive. Once you cross the $500,000 threshold, or if you do not sell most of your products locally and regionally, then you're subject to the full weight of the rules and the cost that comes with that.
Sarah, great information, and I hope people get more information and educate themselves on this act, the Food Safety Modernization Act, signed back in January of 2011. There's some key provisions set to go into place. Get your thoughts known on this. SustainableAgriculture.net for more information. Sarah Hackney with NSAC, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, stick around. You're listening to the Eat, Drink, Explore Radio Network's Market Fresh, and we're back in just a moment. I'm your host, Randall White.